If athletes are deemed employees, Jim Phillips believes universities can pay athletes in sports that make revenue, i.e., football and basketball, and then, to satisfy Title IX, would pay an equivalent number of female athletes. The rest could be cut. You can go from 28 to 6 sports in one fiscal year. Ross Dellinger. So Ross Dellinger was tweeting this, and I think these were comments. These were comments from Jim Phillips talking about how football and basketball, obviously the big money-making sports within college football, this is something I mentioned earlier. This is something I mentioned a couple weeks ago, and I didn't honestly know, all the language involved, and I didn't know how all of the logistics would work out about it, but it was about Dartmouth, and when Dartmouth became a union, deeming that their student athletes are employees, I asked the question, what does that mean for scholarships? What does that mean for athlete, like their scholarship checks? What does that mean for stipends? What does that mean for living? Like, what does all of this mean? And I think what it means is that if these students are deemed employees, that means Title IX is null and void at that point, because these students are employees of the university. Therefore, I think the university would be paying them, which I think already kind of happens through the stipend and the cost of attendance, but they're not paying them NIL. They're not paying them actually a wage. I think at this point, if you're deemed an employee, first off, what does that mean for classes? Like, do these kids even have to go to classes anymore? Because the whole point of college athletics is they're student athletes, student first. So school is a thing, and we're providing you an education. In return, you're playing athletics for us and, giving us everything on that side of things. But now if they're employees, they're employees. They're not students anymore. So do they have to go to school? And how does the pay work? How are they funding how is everything getting funded? How is meals being provided for? How is living being provided for, especially for some of these freshmen? And then you talk about the exodus of Title IX, and you go from 28 to 6 sports in 1 year. Use Montana, for example. What sports probably survive in a situation like this? Football, men's basketball, women's basketball. And if Title IX doesn't exist and student athletes are employees, what is the need for a bunch of the sports that you have in Montana? I'm not saying that we don't need them. I'm not saying that they're not necessary, but in terms of a financial standpoint, from the university thinking of it, if we're paying these athletes, then there's no Title IX. That means we have to cut a lot of sports. And I'm not trying to be harsh about it or anything, but that's just what would happen. That's what Jim Phillips is saying as well. That's what would happen at a lot of universities. If Title IX is not a thing, there are so many women athletes that don't get an opportunity to play sports at the college level. That's why Title IX is very necessary. But it seems that the way we are moving within the college sports realm is that Title IX is eventually going to get weeded out. Because of why? Because of money. Money is becoming the number one issue, the number one thing in sports, college sports. Now, I've mentioned on multiple occasions, and I'll mention it again, these college athletes need to be compensated fairly for their name, image, and likeness. They do a lot. They work hard. They're student athletes at the same time. They're working like a full-time job being students and being athletes. A lot of these kids have a name, image, and likeness that can garner them some dollars in their bank account. They deserve to be able to profit off of that. Now, when we move into Title IX being kicked out, and when we move into these student athletes becoming employees, I think that's the slippery slope with what Dartmouth did. Is like, yes, they're arguing for their benefit. It's good that they are able to form a union. It's good that a union will give them protections as employees, or whatever they're deemed as employees. A union would allow them to be able to argue for protections that they want as employees. That's very good. But the slippery slope that exists is, in doing that, you also set this precedent that, well, if Dartmouth student athletes, basketball student athletes are employees, then every other college student athlete is employees. Therefore, that changes up the scholarship structure. That changes up the Title IX structure. That changes up the student athlete structure. That changes up the amateurism structure that is the whole basis of the NCAA. This changes so many things, and I wanted to get you guys' thoughts about that. These are some of my thoughts about it. I think it's a slippery slope what Dartmouth did. I think what Dartmouth did was awesome, but I think it's a slippery slope, and I think when you start taking out Title IX, when Title IX becomes a topic of discussion, I think it gets very dangerous, because that is going to be taking away a lot of opportunities from a lot of women athletes who honestly might not have even got the opportunity. Like, Title IX exists for a reason. It exists so that there's equality within a campus. And a lot of people might say, well, it gives everybody an equal opportunity, and it gives the equal number of sports as male sports as there are as female sports on a college campus. But what it doesn't do, and what the people in power are probably saying is what it doesn't do, is it doesn't give us equal compensation. Like, just because there's Title IX, and just because it gives women athletes the same number of opportunities as men athletes on a given campus, that doesn't mean that they're going to be bringing in the same amount of money, which I also agree. Like, it's a business at the end of the day, and some of these sports, a lot of these sports don't bring in the same amount of money. Like, if you take the University of Montana, for example, I don't know all the logistics, but I'm almost positive that the only sports that break even or even come close to breaking, like football makes money. I believe men's basketball, correct me in the comments because I don't know. I'm ignorant to this. You guys correct me in the comments. I believe men's basketball either breaks even or is a little above breaking even. And then women's basketball, I think, breaks even or is a little below, or probably a little below. But I think the teams that even come close to being even or being in the green at the University of Montana is football, men's and women's basketball, I think. Don't quote me on that. It might be women's soccer. Women's soccer might be close up there too. They do really well. They win a lot. They're really good. And that's the thing, is like, you look at the University of Montana as a perfect example. You have all these Title IX exists for a reason. These sports teams, it doesn't matter how successful they are, like, sometimes they're just not going to be able to make a lot of money. Like, our soccer team at the University of Montana is amazing. They win way more than our football team in present time. Coach Coach Chris, the head soccer coach for the women's soccer team at the University of Montana, he does an amazing job. They win every year, but it's like, I think they still are trying to pull teeth getting fans to the games, just because I don't know why. I don't have an answer for you, but I think this whole subject is a slippery slope. Title IX needs to stay, and that is the slippery slope that exists with these universities being able to pay their athletes and deem them as employees. It will take opportunities away from a lot of women athletes who years in the past didn't even have these opportunities and were given these opportunities because Title IX. I think Title IX needs to stay. I don't know. I mean, Dartmouth already set the precedent, so it's out there now. So that is what's going to be referred to going on in the future. But I don't know what needs to happen to make sure that Title IX needs to stay. But I just know a lot of student athletes, a lot of female student athletes would lose opportunities from that being taken away. You guys let me know in the comments what you think about that. Do you guys also think it's a slippery slope? Do you think it's necessary for student athletes to be employees? What do you